Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox. I'd like to welcome you to this episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. The FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report is sponsored by Advanced Compliance Solutions, your one-stop shop for all things FCPA compliance related. Today I begin a three-part May the Podcast Be With You episode with my colleague Jay Rosen, Vice President at Translations at Merrill Brink. We are going to celebrate the upcoming and impending opening of Star Wars 7 through an exploration of what we believe to be the top 3 Star Wars movies: Episode 4, New Hope; Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back; and Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. We're going to be talking about some of the parts of the movies that particularly struck us and have stuck with us, and use that as an exploration for some compliance issues. I hope you enjoy this episode. Today we have Episode 4, A New Hope. Thank you very much for listening. Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to a special 3-part FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report, subtitled, May the Podcast Be With You, with my good friend and colleague Jay Rosen. We are going to...
I think there's only one of me here, so I'm singular, not plural.
All right. So we are going to talk about the original 3 Star Wars movies, episodes now 4, 5, and 6, in honor of the upcoming release of Episode 7. We're going to talk about some of our favorite scenes, a little bit about the movie. Jay's going to give us a Hollywood insider look, and then we're going to unpack it from... or use it as a theme to launch into a compliance/translations perspective. Please note that because of our advanced years and our aesthetic predilection, we will not be discussing the episodes 1, 2, and 3, the prequels. If you're a millennial, sorry. They may be your Star Wars, but they're not our Star Wars. So, Jay, with that, welcome, and thanks a lot for taking the time to do this series with me.
Thanks, Tom. Looking forward to it. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Shall I hop right into the Hollywood stuff?
Well, let's set the stage with Star Wars, the original Star Wars, now known as Episode 4, A New Hope. It introduced us to all of the characters, written and directed by George Lucas. In many ways changed a lot of the way Hollywood movies are made and thought about. That's influenced things right up until today. So, yeah, with that, give us some Hollywood insider stuff.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. So I would classify Star Wars A New Hope as the second major blockbuster that really came along and changed the economics in Hollywood. The first one was Jaws, which was directed by Lucas's rival and collaborator, Steven Spielberg. And, you know, what Star Wars really set the scene for was an opportunity where you had a film property that people came back to see multiple times. And, it's kind of built this whole juggernaut that we see as either the summer movie season or the Christmas, New Year's movie season, where you have certain what we'll call tentpole movies, meaning you can use that property to prop up a whole film slate. And Star Wars was basically the precursor to Lord of the Rings and to the Hunger Games and to many other sequels, Harry Potter. So this really set a new economic model that you could have a film that could play in the theater for weeks upon end, that would take advantage of the advertising that was already there, put people in the seats. And then the thing that was really brilliant was that Lucas was able to negotiate all merchandising rights, and the film negative belonged to him. So traditionally, where a director is a hired gun, gets paid a salary and maybe a percentage of the gross, Lucas was set to take in all this money. And as we'll talk about in some of the other podcasts, it allowed him basically to pay his penance to Hollywood, to go back up north to San Rafael and to start building an empire of his own, which consisted of his Star Wars franchise and then his THX sound company, ILM for special effects, and another little company that we'll talk about later called Pixar. So this was really Lucas's throwback, his Valentine's to the serials of the 30s and 40s, your Flash Gordons, your real one or two reelers, where he's taken this kind of, something that could have been campy, but given it a real ethos and pathos, and something that's really occupied the American psyche for the last 30 plus years.
One of the things that intrigued me as I've learned about this movie and the series over time is how much Lucas based this on some work by a fellow named Joseph Campbell. I think originally it was a book called Hero of a Thousand Masks, but the hero's journey. And in this movie, we see the hero, Luke Skywalker, on his own journey. We see an arc of a journey over this trilogy. And indeed, Lucas has a 9-episode plan for the Star Wars franchise where we see a larger story arc. So one of the things that he incorporated into this was a lot of concepts from many different genres. I can point back as far as Greek tragedies and stories, but certainly opera, certainly Arthurian legends, certainly westerns, incorporated and repackaged in a way that certainly entertained us. It gave a technological component in the form of special effects that frankly still wow me today. I recently rewatched episodes 4, 5, and 6 in preparation for this podcast in anticipation of episode 7. So when the jump to light speed is made, when the Death Star is blown up, those are special effects that really still have the wow factor. Even at when this movie came out in 1977, I perhaps had a little bit different perspective sitting in the movie theater than I do today, but they're still very, very powerful. It also really had a cast of characters that were memorable, but it had a cast of actors that were equally professional, equally well known, and using and doing different roles. So if we look to Alec Guinness, who at one point was a huge comedic star in England, then later became a dramatic star as he moved to The Bridge on the River Kwai, his role in Lawrence of Arabia, for example, and other roles, but to a generation that's perhaps younger than us, Jay, he's only known as Obi-Wan Kenobi. So we had Peter Cushing, we had Carrie Fisher, obviously Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill. We had some fabulous character actors, David Prowse as Darth Vader, Anthony Daniels as C-3PO, Kenny Baker as R2-D2. As you opened with the voice of Darth Vader himself. So we had really a great number of really top-notch actors who, between the actors, the story, and the characters they have created, I think certainly stands the test of time, even if you call it just a roller coaster of special effects. So with that, I would really like to maybe introduce today's topic by this movie by talking about, from the compliance perspective, using the cast as the jumping off point or the characters, is how do you create a team? What is the group of people who should be in compliance? Here we have a group of actors leading us to a cast that stays with us in large part through these 3 episodes. And perhaps ask you, Jay, how do you begin to think through creating that translations basis for your international company going forward? So maybe I'll start off here by just saying that if you're a chief compliance officer or you're a compliance practitioner sitting in your office trying to solo your way through compliance, that's not the way that's going to get done. You really have to burn compliance down into the fabric of your company. I was very gratified to see when Wei Chen, the new DOJ Compliance Counsel, spoke last month at New York University. She talked about the operationalness of compliance. How do you operationalize compliance into your company? And it's a two-way street. It's taking compliance down to the business unit where it becomes part of the business process, but it's also having that business process be the business owner of compliance for their own process. So IT has a role, HR has a role, obviously sales has a role, audit has a role, finance has a role. And if you can move compliance down into the operational level, you get into the fabric. But if you have those communications back up from those levels to the compliance function, you have what they need, what they create in terms of their internal controls as your compliance controls. So it's really getting compliance really burned into the DNA of your company that I think is the lesson I can draw from Star Wars: A New Hope. How about some words from Mr. Translations himself from the translations perspective?
Sure. I think the thing that I also took a look back at this memo that circulated in the late 80s in Hollywood, and it was written by a guy named Christopher Vogler, and it's called A Practical Guide to Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And one of the tropes that really works successfully in this whole hero journey is the fact that the hero is going to come across his mentor or her mentor. And it's a seasoned traveler of worlds who gives him or her training equipment or advice that will help on the journey. And I think, quite often when we talk to people in the ethics and compliance world, they're an army of one or an army of two, and they're expected to provide information and backup and ideas to hundreds of thousands of people across the company. And there's really no way to do that on your own. So in part of building your team, there are lots of mentors out there that you can find in the compliance world, and they can speak to different issues and challenges that you're going to meet. And that's really kind of where we see ourselves fitting in at Merrill Brink, that I'm just not out there selling a transactional thing, 25 cents a word, but I'm really talking about a process that can be repeatable on how you approach taking your English information, your code of conduct, your policies and procedures, what's a best practices way to not only disseminate that to your global company, but also to get their input and their buy-in. And once you start working with your language solutions in this manner, you really do get a different feeling between the folks who are out in the field on the front line and the folks who are in the home office coming up with the policies and procedures. And as this process grows, it really does deepen the bonds, and I think it really offers an initial proactive first line of trying to help, bake that compliance into the DNA of your company.
One of the things that I've really been looking forward to this podcast, Jay. Really appreciate your kind of views from the Hollywood insider perspective. But you're a fan, and I've heard you talk about your love for going to the movies back, whether it was growing up in New Hampshire or with your daughters today. So, as a fan, what were some of the highlights of this movie for you? And recognizing you probably saw this movie first as a teenager, and now you're considerably older. Do you still see it through those teenage eyes? And does it still work for you? Or do you see it differently? Or both?
It's absolutely. I'm that kid again, waiting in line at the Bedford Mall for this movie that didn't know anything about, but knew I had to see it. And at this time, it was a General Cinemas 1 and 2, and subsequent years it became a General Cinemas 8, I think. So this is when you had the big screens that your number one film played on, and it was probably expected to play for 5 or 6 weeks, and it was probably there for months on end. So I remember vividly being in that theater, and I think one of the first shots that really just took my breath away is there's a shot where the Imperial cruiser is moving over the screen, and this is a shot that you see in many space epics is that you see the nose of the ship pass over you, and then as the plane goes across, you start to get an idea of just how long and how big it is. And for something like that to appear to be real, that was one thing that we had never seen on the screen up until that point. And, from the late 70s into now, Lucas and his ILM crew have just been at the forefront of technology and creating things that only seem to exist in somebody's imagination and bringing them to life. So that thing, the jump to light speed, the saber battles, there are just so many iconic moments in that movie that still resonate.
Jay, for me, a couple of things. But first, let me start with the music of John Williams, because we haven't really talked about that, and that is really an integral part to every Star Wars movie. But the first time we all heard this soundtrack, it was just spectacular. And Williams was able to take the emotions that we saw on screen and translate those into music, which, at least for me, still resonates to this day. So the soundtrack of John Williams was an integral part and something I still enjoy. But the visual scenes, the one that strikes me the most, and I don't know why, if it's a little boy in me, if it's Luke looking out on a future, but at the end of the first night, we see Luke on the desert planet of Tatooine, his home planet, and he looks out and he sees a red sky with two moons. And that scene's always stuck with me. And then from the first time I saw it, though, was the bar scene. Now, in 1977, I was perhaps in a little more enhanced condition than I am generally now. And that was about the funniest thing I think I'd ever seen. And to this day, it still puts a smile on my face, remembering how much I laughed at that scene. So those were some of the highlights for me, but there's so much to this. It's so rich, and it really did change movie making in many ways, and I think most for the positive. So with that, Jay, I really appreciate you taking the time with me. I look forward to us exploring the next two episodes. Star Wars: The Force Awakens, Episode 7 of the however long series it will be, is scheduled for release on December 18th. I have booked my tickets for the 20th, so I'm looking forward to going to see it. I hope you guys can get to see it, and thanks a lot, and we look forward to visiting about the next two movies. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Tom. I'll talk to you soon.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. I hope you've enjoyed our exploration of Episode 4 of the Star Wars original trilogy, A New Hope. And I hope you'll come back to listen to our exploration of Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. If you have any questions that you would like answered in my next mailbag episode, I hope you will email me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Also, I hope you'll check out the SCCE website, where they have posted the first podcast of Unfair and Unbalanced, a podcast with Tom Fox and Roy Snell. I've cross-posted it on my site, so you may listen to it there as well. If you have any questions, please give me a shout. I look forward to visiting with you again. Thank you for listening.